Hi, everybody. I'm here. Um, get used to it. Anyway, hi, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world you may happen to be. I'm here now in California. It's a couple minutes after 1. I was a little late getting started tonight. We've had a tough week in my family, which I don't want to say culminated, that's not the right word, but we lost I don't like that word either. My mom died on Friday, which is, just, it's beyond description, really, pretty much for anybody in any situation. So I won't belabor it. And I'm not going to actually take this particular time to eulogize her because she deserves more than that. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen either. In other circumstances, I might have said, "Oh, I'm not up to doing this," but for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's nice to gather with friends and people, good people, in a situation like this, and also it's reading. The reading thing is very important. The reading thing was very important to my mom and also to me. And I'm going to, before I read the chapter tonight, I'm going to briefly just reread the dedication to the book because, that's very appropriate. Who I am and what I became and how I turned out not to be making a lot of money designing video games or directing films, but instead I'm paddling along in a slightly slower lane, but very happily as a writer of books, is in large part due to my mom, Barbara Evans. And she read to me when I was very young, as many parents do. So I'm not claiming anything unusual there, but it had a huge effect on me. And in fact, one of the things in Mom's last few days, well, her time in the hospital. She was in the hospital this time for about 2.5 weeks. And during that time, I'm happy to say she was very much there. It was really pretty much right up until the end. She was herself. And so if you have to go, going at a good old age with your loved ones around you, telling you how much they love you, and with your wits still intact, and relatively painlessly, and still able to enjoy, making jokes and being joked with in turn. There are a lot worse things to have happen to you after a good long life. And she had a very good life and a very long life. Not as long as we hoped, obviously. We were not really expecting this. She's had a few health problems over the years, but as Deb and I were saying, none of us really thought, we kind of just thought she was going to go plugging on for a long time to come. But the message is you never know, and you don't always even get that chance to tell people that you love them. We were very fortunate that way, and she got to see pretty much all of her grandkids and all of her kids, her sons, and her sons' wives, who were super important to her too. And so it was a difficult time, but during that time, I was actually reading to her in part because that was a special bond that we had from my childhood. I was not a child born in wedlock, although the man that I think of as my dad and who is my dad, they married a few years later. He was not my biological father. So at first it was just me and my mom and my grandmother, and she read to me a lot when I was young, and the books that she read to me were super influential on me and on what I later became. And so when I was visiting her at the hospital, I took a copy, or took a version of one of our favorite books, which was The Wind in the Willows, and read that to her. And I'm only sorry I didn't get to finish it, that we only got a little ways into it, although of course obviously we had read it all those many years ago, and it was still a family touchstone. And especially for mom and me, it was a touchstone. She was very fond of Mr. Toad, the ridiculous Mr. Toad, and we were both very moved when I was a small child by the scene where the jailer's daughter takes pity on poor Mr. Toad, who's been jailed for his dreadful driving offenses, and brings him a plate full of buttered toast. And I remember when I was a child, my mom and I kind of both looked at each other at that point in the story and said, we'd better go get some buttered toast. So reading and sharing of books and stories and everything to do with that was very, very important. And of course, for people of my generation, there were movies and TV, obviously, but if you wanted the depth of something, it was books. It was books, and my mom was a great reader and influenced me that way. And I became a very, very dedicated reader myself, and that's what eventually led me into writing. But as I said, I'm not going to eulogize her in this particular situation. It's not really the appropriate time, except obviously it just happened. And my brothers and their wives were wonderful, and the whole family has been really good about helping each other out and propping each other up, because our mom was she was the matriarch. She was the matriarch. She had been the glue that held the family together in a lot of ways. And but as sad as we are, I keep coming back again and again to we were lucky. I mean, look, I'm old, I'm old. I'm very old, and I just lost my mom. We had her all that time. And so, of course there's grief. Of course there's amazing sadness. There's, somebody who's important to you, to anybody, that the idea that you're never going to see them again, you're never going to talk with them again is shocking, devastating. But it's also something that comes to all of us. And so I don't want to dwell on that either. It's not that I'm not thinking about it. Of course I am. Everybody in our family is, and many, many, many friends, because she was somebody who pulled people in and extended the family out to other people as well. So a lot of people, are dealing with it. But she had a great life, which, as I said, at some point I will talk more about and probably write about on my social media. And so she was, it was missed and is missed by a lot of people. But I can mourn for the loss of her, but I cannot say she did not have a good life. And to be honest, she had a good ending. I would not have wanted it, but there are a lot worse ways to go than in relatively comfortable situation. She wasn't in terrible pain or anything, and surrounded by people who loved her and kept telling her that, and probably embarrassing her, knowing my mom, who definitely wanted to do good for people. But and this is something I got from her, you want to do good, you want to be a good person, but as soon as people start going, oh, you're a good person, you're like, don't make me embarrassed here. Don't put me on the spot. So I figured there was really nothing more appropriate that I could do tonight than to go ahead and read, because that was such an important thing with us. So I'm just going to quickly say hello to everybody, and then I'm going to just jump into the chapter in the Dragonbone chair that is next up. So a lot of very kind people, including right here tonight, are sending condolences and sympathies and all that. So I'm not going to necessarily respond to every single one, but believe me, I am reading them, and I'm grateful for it. And if you'd known her, you would have liked her. She's, she was funny, and she was kind and smart as hell. So, that's a great combination in a human being. Anyway, so hi, Suzanne. Good morning to you in Yorkshire. And Becky, hello. Good to see you. Wouter, hello. Thank you for the kind words. Anamika, same thing. Um, very much appreciated. Kristen, hello, hello. Good to see you. Mark, good morning. Hertie, a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Maria Jose, hello, hello. And I hope the weather's bearable in Spain right at the moment. I'm not sure how things are. Hi, Chris. Thank you for your kind words. There's my dear mother-in-law, Hazel. Hi, sweetie. I know your thoughts are with us, and you know, we're all grateful for it, and we all miss you too. So we're going to try and do something about it when the whole COVID air travel thing is a little bit better, because we miss you and we want to see you. Kristen, yes, I said hello, Mahmoud. Thank you for checking in. Good to see you. Jessica, lovely to see you. Thank you. Hugs accepted. Jeremy, hi Jeremy, good to see you. Oh, and if Jonathan's there too, give him my very best. Laura, hello and thank you. Ilva, hello, sweetie. Good to hear from you. We will talk soon. Who else? Holger, hello. Did I already say hello to Holger? Well, if I didn't, it doesn't hurt. If I did, it doesn't hurt to do it twice. So good to see you, Holger. And who else is here that I haven't checked in with yet? Christina, hello, hello. Thank you for the kind words. James D. Scott, same, thank you. Pleasure to see you here. Becky, hi. Yes, distraction is good. Oh, how sweet. What a sweet comment. Thank you for telling me that. Yeah, you know, we take what we can get, and having friends and having, you know, folks like you who are, you know, friends, is nice at a time like this. So I do appreciate it. I'm bathing in all the well wishes, and I only wish my brothers and my dad could get the same. But we're all passing it along to each other. So Margaret, hi. Thank you so much. You are helping. It is helping to know you people are out there. Much appreciated. Teresa, my dear friend. Hello, sweetie. Thank you for dropping by. Massive hugs back to you. We'll be talking to you soon. So Sally, hello. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure. I'm happy to read to you. I always am, and like I said, it's a family thing. It's a family thing. I'm glad I got to read to my mom, and it was also important because my mom is a talker. Yeah, everybody goes, "What a shock!" Tad's mom is a talker, but she is a talker, and thank God for it, because she always had a lot of interesting and useful and funny things to say. But because she was suffering through some severe lung problems, I was trying to get her to talk less, and that was one of the reasons that I thought reading might be a good thing, besides obviously what we shared. So anyway, thank you, Sally. I'm happy to. Ron, hello, my friend. Thank you for your words. Appreciated. Emily, hi, sweetie. That's I always forget what Emily is, but M is my relation, my niece's daughter, and thank you for checking in and letting us know. Hi there, Carolyn. I know. Yeah, well, I appreciate it. It's nice to hear from you. It's always nice to hear from you. I would love to hear from you more, but it's a pleasure to see you and see your name and hear from you. So thank you. And Andre, thank you. And a pleasure to see you. Sandra, hello. Thanks. Oh, appreciated. Rika, thank you for sending love. Appreciate it. And Iris, same thing. So thank you for all the kind words. Thank you for joining me. Much of it, much of what you've said is it's getting to me. I'm just, you know, it's at times like this, it's really difficult to respond. And the idea of going down the list and liking all the kind comments is like a bit much. Same thing on birthdays, but I'm so grateful that people care enough, you know, to be in touch and to let me know. It's very important and it's very valued. Oh, speaking of, last thing, we have some friends who've been contacting Deb through Twitter, I believe, and I think I mentioned this last week, and are still having trouble making comments. I am so sorry. I don't know why that is. You know, it all goes through the Facebook page. I don't think there's a thing on here that would affect any of that as far as I know, and I don't dare try it while I'm online. But I have looked, and I've made sure that the Facebook page that it goes to says public can comment, meaning everybody, not just friends. But it does seem to be mainly the Facebook friends, so I don't know where the screw up is. But I am trying, and I'm really sorry that you want to comment and can't. So we will keep working at it. It's we've got a kludgy system going on here where we've got different people. It would help actually if anybody's having that problem of wanting to comment and not being allowed to. Again, on my end, have always, and it's the same thing true with my social media in general, I always try and have it, anybody can comment. I don't want to have something where only certain people are allowed to. Unless you're a total jerk and really insult all the people who share my social media accounts, in which case, I don't need you. But if you're any kind of decent human being, even if you don't agree with me about things, that's okay. But anyway, so what I was going to say is to, I think it's Joanna. Anyway, sorry, it's been a rough week. If you're still trying to comment and you're not able to, please let me know what your path is. In other words, are you clicking on from Twitter and it takes you to the Facebook page, or are you going directly to the Facebook page, or is there some other way that you're getting it? Because that may help me to figure out where the bottleneck is, where this is happening. So thank you for that. And again, sorry for the problem. It's not anything I want to have happening. Anyway, we are just now getting to a part in the story, which I'm going to be reading tonight, which is where I tell people when they say to me, does anything ever happen in this book? I said, well, yeah, I spend a long time setting things up. I did that fairly deliberately. Even at the time, I was kind of trying to think things through when I was writing. And it was a bit of a risk, but I also felt, as I think I mentioned before, I really wanted to establish this world, first of all, so the readers would understand what a kind of cultural shock happens to the main protagonists when they get out into the world. And also because the happenings were going to be so apocalyptic that I wanted people to understand what was being lost. And I wanted to feel the rhythms of everyday life in this very kind of 14th century, pretty, historically similar kind of to 14th century Europe setting. So that as the main characters went out and met people who were not people in the traditional human sense and began to hear other versions of the history they had been taught and things like that, the readers would feel it. That was my idea. But anyway, so when people used to ask me, does anything ever happen in this book of yours? I would often say, well, not immediately, but, about chapter 12, everything starts to blow up. Well, that's where we are tonight. But let me first read the dedication from these books because it's highly important and to what I'm talking about. And of course, it's dedicated to the woman that we all just lost this week. Well, we didn't lose. We can never lose her. She's in us. She's in us. But we don't have her with us anymore. So I don't know why people are so reluctant to say died. I don't really like the term passed away because it has this sort of connotation of just vanishing, just drifting away. And there's so many different ways that people leave or end their physical existence. I find it, I don't know, it's a little too euphemistic for me. I've actually been starting to kind of stay away from it. I know whatever works is my philosophy about everything. So if you personally in your life want to say passed away or, left us or whatever, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying more and more with me, I kind of like, oh, my mother died. That's what happened. There's no sense in trying to make it sound different than what it actually was. But anyway, sorry, another tad tangent. You can see that grief has not changed my ability to ramble. Anyway, so this is the original dedication. This book is dedicated to my mother, Barbara Jean Evans, who taught to me a deep affection for Toad Hall, the 100-acre woods, the Shire, and many other hidden places and countries beyond the fields we know. She also induced in me a lifelong desire to make my own discoveries and to share them with others. I wish to share this book with her. Chapter 12, 6 Silver Sparrows. Simon stumbled across the commons yard, his thoughts shouting in his head like a great crowd. Oh, for those of you who might just be tuning in tonight and don't know what's happening, Simon has just discovered that the missing prince, the brother of the king, is chained up in the castle dungeon in secret, being watched over by the really nasty alchemist priest Pryrates. And that's why Simon is freaked out. He wasn't supposed to be down there. He was almost caught by Pryrates. That's why he's freaking out. So, back to, again, chapter 12, 6 Silver Sparrows. Simon stumbled across the commons yard, his thoughts shouting in his head like a great crowd. He wanted to hide. He wanted to run away. He wanted to bellow the terrible truth and laugh, to bring the castle folk tripping and tumbling out of doors. How sure they were, sure about everything, guessing and gossiping. But they knew nothing. Nothing. Simon wanted to howl and knock things over, but he could not free his heart from the spell of fear cast by Pryrates' carrion bird eyes. What could be done? Who would help to turn the world right side up again? Morganes. Even as Simon ran, shamble-jointed across the dusky commons, the doctor's calm, quizzical face appeared in his thoughts, pushing back the priest's deathly countenance and the chained shadow in the dungeon below. Without another conscious thought, he fled past the chained, black-painted gate of Yeldon's tower and up the stairs to the chancellery. In mere moments, he was through the long hallways and pulling open the door to forbidden Green Angel Tower. So violent was his need to reach the doctor's chambers that had Barnabas the sexton been waiting there to catch him, Simon might have turned to quicksilver in the man's hands. A great wind rushed through him, filling him with wild haste, pushing him on. Before the tower's side door had swung shut behind him, he was on the drawbridge. Seconds later, he was pounding on Morganes' door. A pair of Erkin guardsmen looked up incuriously, then went back to their dice. "Doctor! Doctor! Doctor!" Simon shouted, banging away like a demented cooper. The doctor quickly appeared, feet bare and eyes alarmed. "Horns of snorting Kreunos, boy! Are you mad? Have you eaten bumblebees?" Simon pushed past Morganes without a word of explanation and headed down the corridor. He stood panting before the inner door as the little man came up behind. After a moment of shrewd inspection, Morganes let himself and Simon in. No sooner had the door closed than Simon began the story of his expedition and its results. The doctor fussed up a small fire and poured a jar of spicy hippocras into a pan to warm. As he worked, Morganes listened, carefully poking an occasional question to Simon's tirade, as a man might reach a stick into a bear cage. He shook his head grimly, handing the youth a cup of mulled wine, then sat down with his own cup in a scarred, high-backed chair. He had put slippers on his thin white feet as he sat cross-legged on the chair cushion, his gray robe rucked up above his bony shins. And I know I shouldn't have touched a magic door, Doctor. I know it, but I did. And it was Josua. I'm sorry, I'm getting things out of order, but I'm sure I saw him. He had a beard, I think, and he looked terrible, but it was him. Morganes sipped his wine and dabbed at his chin whiskers with a long sleeve. "I believe you, lad," he said. "I wish that I didn't, but it makes an evil kind of sense. It confirms some strange information I received." "But what will we do?" Simon almost shouted. "He's dying. Did Elias do that to him? Does the king know? I really can't say. It is certain, however, that Pryrates knows. The doctor put down his wine cup and stood. Behind his head, the last of the afternoon sun reddened the narrow windows. As for what to do, the first thing is for you to go and eat supper. Supper? Simon choked, spattering Hippocras down his tunic. With Prince Joshua? Yes, boy, that's what I said. Supper. There's nothing we can do right this instant, and I need to think. If you miss your supper, it will just raise a hue and cry, albeit a small one, and it will help to do just what we don't want to do, attract attention. No, go now and eat supper, and between bites keep your mouth shut, will you? Mealtime seemed to pass as slowly as spring thaw. Wedged between loudly chewing scullions, his heart beating double time, Simon resisted the wild impulse to lash out and knock cups and crockery spinning to the rush-strewn floor. The conversation infuriated him with its irrelevance, and the shepherd's pie that Judith had prepared especially for Beltane Eve was as tasteless and unchewable in his mouth as wood. Rachel watched his fidgeting with displeasure from her seat at the head of the table. When Simon had sat still as long as he could and leaped up to make his excuses, she followed him to the door. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm in a hurry, he said, hoping to stave off the lecture she seemed primed to deliver. Dr. Morganis has something very important he wants me to help him with. Please? For a moment, the dragon looked as though she were going to get that fearful grip on his ear and bring him forcibly back to the table. But something in his face or tone caught at her. For a moment, she almost smiled. All right, boy. Just this once, but you thank Judith for that nice bit of pie before you go. She worked on it the whole afternoon. Simon bolted over to Judith, pitched like a huge tent at her own table. Her plump cheeks colored prettily while he praised her exertions. As he hurried back to the door, Rachel leaned out and captured his sleeve. He stopped and turned, mouth already open to complain, but Rachel only said, Now just calm yourself and be careful, you mooncalf boy. Nothing so important that you should kill yourself getting there. She patted his arm and released him. He was through the door and gone as she watched. Simon had pulled on his vest and coat by the time he reached the well. Morganis had not yet arrived, so he paced impatiently in the deeper shadow of the dining hall until a soft voice at his elbow made him start in surprise. Sorry to make you wait, lad. Inch came by, and I had a devilish time convincing him that I didn't need him after all. The doctor pulled his hood forward, hiding his face. How did you come up so quietly? Simon asked, his whisper an imitation of the doctor's. I can still get about a little, Simon, the doctor said in an injured tone. I am old, but not yet moribund. Simon did not know what moribund meant, but he caught the general idea. Sorry, he whispered. The two made their way silently down the dining room stairs and into the first storage room, where Morganis produced a crystal sphere the size of a green apple. When he rubbed it, a small spark flickered into being at the center, gradually brightening until it limned the encircling casks and bundles with a soft, honey-colored light. Morganis shrouded the nether half of it in his sleeve and held it before them as they paced carefully through the stacked dry goods. The hatchway was closed. Simon did not remember whether or not he had shut it himself in his mad dash out. They went down the ladder carefully, Simon leading, Morganis above him casting about this way and that with the shining globe. Simon pointed out the closet, where Pryrates had almost captured him. They passed on down to the bottom floor. The lowermost room was as untenanted as before, but the door leading to the stone passageway was shut. Simon was almost positive that he had not done this, and told Morgane so, but the little man just waved a hand and strode to the wall, finding the spot where the crack had been, according to Simon's directions. The doctor rubbed his hand in a circular movement across the wall, muttering something under his breath, but no crevice appeared. After Morgane had squatted by the wall talking to himself for some time, Simon grew tired of bouncing from one foot to the other and crouched down at the doctor's side. "Can't you just say some magic and make it open?" "No," Morgane hissed. "A wise man never, I repeat, never uses the art when he doesn't need to, especially when dealing with another adept like our father Pyrates. We might as well sign my name to it." As Simon sat back on his heels and scowled, the doctor placed his left hand flat in the middle of the area where the door had been. After a moment's light palpation of the surface, he hit it smartly with the heel of his right hand. The door popped open, pouring torchlight into the room. The doctor peeked through, then dropped his lamp crystal into the hem of his voluminous sleeve and pulled out a stitched leather bag. "Ah, Simon, lad," he chuckled quietly, "what a thief I would have made. It was not a magic door, only hidden by use of the art. Come on now." They stepped through into the damp stone corridor. Their footfalls made syrupy echoes as they slipped and stepped down the walkway to the corridor's end and the locked door. After a moment's examination of the lock, Morgane stepped to the peephole and peered inside. "I think you're right, lad," he hissed. "Nuani's shinbone, but I wish you weren't." He returned to the scrutiny of the lock. "Run up to the end of the corridor and keep an ear open, won't you?" As Simon stood guard, Morgane fished around in his leather bag, at last extracting a long, needle-thin blade set in a wooden handle. He waved it merrily at Simon. "Naraxi pig sticker. Knew it would come in useful one day." He tested it against the keyhole. It slid into the aperture with room to spare. He removed it and shook a tiny jar from his bag, which he uncorked with his teeth. As Simon watched, fascinated, Morgane upended the jar and poured a dark, sticky substance onto the needle blade, then quickly poked the tip back into the keyhole. It left glistening traces as it passed into the lock. Morgane wriggled the pig sticker for a moment, then stepped back and counted on his fingers. When he had tallied both hands 3 times each, he grasped the slender handle and twisted. He grimaced and let go. "Come here, Simon. We need your strong young arms." At the doctor's direction, Simon grasped the strange tool by the butt end and began to twist. For a moment, his sweaty palms slipped on the polished wood. He tightened his grip, and after a short interval felt something catch inside the lock. An instant later, he heard the bolt slide back. Morgane nodded his head, and Simon shouldered the door open. The smoldering rushes in the wall socket threw only faint light. As Simon and the doctor approached, they saw the shackled figure at the rear of the cell look up, and his eyes widened slowly as if in some kind of recognition. His mouth worked, but only a scratchy huff of breath came out. The smell of wet, foul straw was overwhelming. Oh, my poor Prince Josua," Morgane said. As the doctor gave a quick inspection to Josua's manacles, Simon could only look on, feeling as helpless to affect the rush of events as if he dreamed. The prince was achingly thin and bearded like a roadside doom-crier. The parts of his skin that showed through the miserable sacking were covered with red sores. Morgane was whispering in Josua Lackhand's ear. He had again produced his bag and held in his hand a shallow pot, the sort that ladies kept for their lip paint. Briskly rubbing something from the pot on first one palm, then the other, the little doctor once more looked over to Joshua's restraints. Both arms were shackled to a massive iron ring in the wall, one manacled about the wrist, the other, the handless other, by a cuff about the prince's thin upper arm. Morganes finished smearing his hands and passed pot and bag to Simon. "Now, be a good lad," he said, "and cover your eyes. I traded a silk-bound volume of Placinian Mere Menace, the only one north of Pedruan, for this muck. I just hope... Simon, do cover your eyes." As the youth raised his hands, he saw Morganes reaching for the ring that bound the prince's chains to the stone. An instant later, a flash of light glared pinkly through Simon's meshed fingers, accompanied by a crack like hammer on slate. When the youth looked again, Prince Joshua lay with his chains in a heap on the floor, and Morganes kneeled beside him, palms smoking. The wall ring was blackened and twisted like a burnt bannock. "Pah!" the doctor gasped. I hope I never have to do that again. Can you pick up the prince, Simon? I am very weak." Joshua rolled stiffly over and looked around. "I think I can walk. Priorities gave me something." "Nonsense." Morganes took a deep breath and climbed shakily to his feet. "Simon is a strong lad. Come on, boy, don't gape. Pick him up." After some maneuvering, Simon managed to wrap the hanging strands of Joshua's chains, still attached at wrist and arm, into a loop around the prince's waist. Then, with Morganes' assistance, he somehow hoisted Joshua up like a pick-a-back child. He stood and sucked in a great draught of air. For a moment he feared he could not bear up, but with a clumsy hop he moved Joshua higher on his back, and found that even with the added weight of the chains it was not impossible. "Wipe that silly smile off your face, Simon," the doctor said. "We still have to get him up the ladder." Somehow they managed. Simon grunting, almost weeping with the exertion, Joshua pulling weakly at the rungs, Morganes pushing behind and whispering encouragement. It was a long, nightmarish climb, but at last they reached the main storeroom. Morganes scurried past as Simon leaned against a bale to rest, the prince still clinging to his back. Somewhere, Morganes muttered, pushing his way between the close-stacked goods. When he reached the southern wall of the room, shining his crystal before him, he began to search in earnest. "What?" Simon started to ask, but the doctor silenced him with a gesture. As they watched Morganes appear and disappear behind piles of barrels, Simon felt a delicate touch on his hair. The prince was patting gently at his head. Real, Joshua breathed. Simon felt something wet run down his neck. "Found it!" came Morganes' hushed but triumphant cry. "Come along!" Simon rose, staggering a little, and carried the prince forward. The doctor was standing beside the blank stone wall, gesturing toward a pyramid of large casks. The lamp crystal gave him the shadow of a looming giant. "Found what?" Simon adjusted the prince and stared. "Barrels?" "Indeed," the doctor cackled. With a flourish, he twisted the round rim of the topmost cask a half-turn. The whole side of the barrel swung open, as if it were a door, revealing cavernous darkness beyond. Simon stared suspiciously. "What's that?" "A passageway, you foolish boy." Morganes took his elbow and guided him toward the open-sided barrel, which stood scarcely more than chest-high. "This castle is honeycombed with such secret byways." With a frown, Simon stooped, peering at the black depths beyond. "In there?" Morganes nodded. Simon, realizing he could not walk through, got down on his knees to inch inside, the prince riding his back as if he were a festival pony. "I didn't know there were such passages in the storerooms," he said, his voice echoing in the barrel. Morganes leaned down to guide Josua's head under the low entrance. "Simon, there are more things you don't know than there are things that I do know. I despair of the imbalance. Now close your mouth and let's hurry." They were able to stand again on the far side. Morganes' crystal revealed a long, angled corridor, unremarkable but for a fabulous accumulation of dust. "Ah, Simon," Morganes said as they hurried along, "I only wish I had time to show you some of the rooms past which this hallway creeps. Some were the chambers of a very great, very beautiful lady. She used this passage to keep her secret assignations." The doctor looked up at Josua, whose face lay against Simon's neck. "Sleeping now," Morganes murmured. "All sleeping." The corridor climbed and dipped, turning one way and another. They passed many doors, some whose locks were rusted shut, some whose handles were as shiny as a new fithing piece. Once they passed a series of small windows. In a brief glance, Simon was startled to see sentries on the western wall, silhouetted against the sky. The clouds were tinted a faint rose where the sun had gone. We must be above the dining hall," Simon marveled. "When did we do all the climbing?" They were stumbling in exhaustion when Morganes finally stopped. There were no windows in this part of the winding corridor, only tapestries. Morganes lifted one, revealing gray stone beneath. "Wrong tapestry," the doctor panted, lifting the next one to reveal a door of rough wood. He laid his ear against it and listened for a moment, then pulled it open. "Hall of Records," he gestured at the torchlit hallway beyond. "Only a few 100 paces from my chambers." When Simon and his passenger had come through, he let the door swing shut behind him. It closed with an authoritative bump. Looking back, Simon could not distinguish it from other wooden panels that lined the corridor wall. There was only one last dash to be made in the open, a relatively rapid sprint from the easternmost door of the archive rooms across the open commons. As they lurched across the shadowed grass, staying as close to the walls as they could without tripping through the ivy, Simon thought he saw a movement in the shadows of the wall across the yard, something large that shifted slightly as though to watch their passage, a familiar, stoop-shouldered form. But the light was dying fast, and he could not be sure. It was only one more black spot moving before his eyes. He had a stitch in his side that felt as though someone had caught his rib with Reuben's foundry tongs. Morganes, who had limped ahead, held the door open. Simon tottered through, carefully putting his burden down, then pitched full length on the cool flagstones, sweaty and breathless. The world spun about him in a giddy dance. "Here, your highness, drink this." "Go on," he heard Morganes say. After some little while he opened his eyes and lifted himself on one elbow. Josua sat propped against the wall. Morganes crouched over him, holding a brown ceramic jug. "Better?" the doctor asked. The prince nodded weakly. "Stronger, already. This liquor feels like what Pyrates gave me, but not so bitter. Said that I was weakening too fast, that they needed me tonight." "Needed you? I don't like the sound of that, not at all." Morganes brought the jug over to Simon. The drink was busy and sour to the taste, but warming. The doctor peered out the door, then dropped the bolt. "Tomorrow is Beltane Day, the 1st of Maya," he said. "Tonight is Tonight is a very bad night, my prince. Stoning night, it is called. Simon felt the doctor's liquor burning pleasantly as it moved down to his stomach. The ache in his joints lessened as though a twisted length of cloth had been slackened a turn or two. He sat up, feeling dizzy. I find it ominous, their needing you on such a night, Morganes repeated. I fear worse things even than the imprisoning of the king's brother. The imprisoning itself was bad enough for me. A wry grimace stretched Josua's gaunt features, then disappeared. Deep lines of sorrow took its place. Morganes, he said a moment later, his voice cracking, those whoreson bastards killed my men. They ambushed us. The doctor raised his hand as though to grasp the prince's shoulder, then put it awkwardly back down. I'm sure, my lord, I'm sure. Do you know for certain whether your brother was responsible? Could it have been Priorites acting alone? Josua shook his head wearily. I don't know. The men who attacked us wore no insignia, and I never saw anyone but the priest once I was brought here. But it is astonishing to consider Priorites doing such a thing without Elias. True. But why? Why, damn them? I do not covet power. The reverse, if anything. You know that, Morganes. Why should they do this? Oh, my prince, I am afraid I do not have the answers right this instant. But I must say this goes far toward confirming my suspicions about other things, about northern matters. Do you remember hearing of the white foxes? Morganes' tone was significant, but the prince only cocked an eyebrow and said nothing. Well, there is no time to spend talking of my fears at this moment. Our time is short, and we must attend to more immediate matters. Morganes helped Simon up from the floor, then went puttering off in search of something. The youth stood looking shyly at Prince Josua, who remained slumped against the wall, eyes closed. The doctor returned with a hammer, its head rounded by much use, and a chisel. Strike off Prince Josua's chains, will you, lad? I have a few things left to attend to. He scuttled off again. Your Highness? Simon said quietly, approaching the prince. Josua opened bleary eyes and stared, first at the youth, then at the tools he carried. He nodded. Kneeling at the prince's side, Simon burst the lock on the band that encircled Josua's right arm with a pair of sharp blows. As he moved round to the prince's left, Josua opened his eyes again and laid a restraining hand on Simon's arm. Take only the chain from this side, young one. A ghostly smile flickered across his face. Leave me the shackle to remember my brother by. Leave me his band. He displayed the puckered stump of his right wrist. We have a sort of tally system, you see. Simon, suddenly chilled, trembled as he braced Josua's left forearm against the stone flags. With a single stroke, he sliced through the chain, leaving the cuff of blackened iron above the hand. Morganes appeared, carrying a bundle of dark clothing. Come, Josua, we must hurry. It is almost an hour after dark, and who knows when they will go looking for you. I broke my lockpick off in the door, but that will not long prevent them from discovering your absence. What will we do? Asked the prince, standing unsteadily on his feet as Simon helped him into the musty peasant gear. Who in the castle can we trust? Nobody, at present, not on such short notice. That is why you must make your way to Naglemund. Only there will you be safe. Naglemund. Josua seemed bemused. I have dreamed so often of my home there in these horrible months. But No, I must show the people my brother's duplicity. I will find strong arms to aid me. Not here. Not now. Morganase's voice was firm, his bright eyes commanding. You will find yourself back in a dungeon, and this time you will go quickly to a private beheading. Don't you see, you must get to a strong place where you are safe from treachery before you can press any claim. Many kings have imprisoned and killed their relatives. Most got away with it. It takes more than familial infighting to excite the populace. Well, said Josua reluctantly, even if you are correct, how would I escape? A fit of coughing shook him. The castle gates are doubtless closed for the night. Should I walk up to the inner gate dressed as a traveling minstrel and try to sing my way out? Morganese smiled. Simon was impressed by the spirit of the grim prince, who an hour before had been chained in a damp cell with no hope of rescue. As it happens, you have not caught me unprepared with that question, the doctor said. Please observe. He walked to the back of the long chamber, to the corner where Simon had once cried against the rough stone wall. He gestured to the star chart, whose connected constellations formed a four-winged bird. With a little bow, he swept the chart aside. Behind it lay a great square hole cut into the rock, set with a wooden door. As I demonstrated already, Pyrates is not the only one with hidden doors and secret passages, the doctor chuckled. Father Redcape is a newcomer, and has much yet to learn about the castle that has been my home for longer than you two could guess. Simon was so excited that he could hardly stand still, but Josua's expression was doubtful. Where does it go, Morganese? He asked. It will do me scant good to escape Elias's dungeon and rack only to find myself in the Hayholt's moat. Never fear. This castle is built on a warren of caves and tunnels, not to mention the ruins of the older castle beneath us. The whole maze is so vast that even I do not know the half of it, but I know it well enough to give you safe passage out. Come with me. Morganese led the prince, who went leaning on Simon's arm, over to the chamber-spanning table. There he spread out a rolled parchment whose edges were gray and feathery with age. You see, said Morganese, I have not been idle while my young friend Simon here was at supper. This is a plan of the catacombs. Of necessity only a partial one, but with your route marked. If you follow this carefully, you will find yourself above ground at last, in the Lich Yard beyond the walls of Urchester. From there I am sure you can find your way to safe haven for the night. After they had studied the map, Morganese pulled Josua aside, and the two of them engaged in whispered conversation. Simon, feeling more than a little left out, stood and examined the doctor's chart. Morganese had marked the path with bright red ink. Simon's head swam, following the twists and turns. When the two men finished their discussion, Josua collected the map. Well, old friend, he said, if I am to go, then I should go quickly. It would be unwise for another hour to find me still here in the Hayholt. I shall think carefully on the other things you have told me. His gaze swept around the cluttered room. I only fear what your brave acts might bring down on you. There is nothing you can do about that, Josua, Morganese replied, and I am not without some defenses of my own. A few feints and tricks I can employ. As soon as Simon told me about finding you, I began to make some preparations. I have long feared that my hand would be forced. It has only been hastened slightly by this. Here, take this torch. So saying, the little doctor removed a brand from the wall and gave it to the prince, next handing him a sack that hung next to it on a hook. I have put some food in here for you, and some more of the curative liquor. It is not much, but you must travel light. Please, hurry. He held the star chart up and away from the doorway. "Send word to me soon, as you are safe at Naglemund, and I will have more things to tell." The prince nodded, limping slowly into the corridor mouth. The torch's flame pushed his shadow far down the dark shaft as he turned back. "I will never forget this, Morgenes," he said. "And you, young man, you have done a brave thing today. I hope it will be the making of your future someday." Simon knelt, embarrassed by the emotions he felt. The prince looked so haggard and grim. He felt pride, sorrow, and fear all pulling at him. His thoughts stirred and muddied. "Fare you well, Josua," Morgenes said, resting a hand on Simon's shoulder. Together they watched the prince's torch recede down the low passageway until it was swallowed by the murk. The doctor pulled the door shut and dropped the hanging into place. "Come, Simon," he said then. "We still have much to do. Pyrates is missing his guest this stoning night, and I cannot think he will be pleased." And actually, there's only about 2 pages, 3 pages, about 4 pages left in this chapter. So I think I'm just going to read it to the end. It'll probably take us about 10 minutes past the top of the hour. If that's an inconvenience for you, I apologize, but you can listen to the rest of it later on YouTube or something, or on my pages. An interval crept by in silence. Simon dangled his feet from his perch on the tabletop, frightened but nevertheless savoring the excitement that charged the room, that now hung all over all of the staid old castle. Morgenes fluttered back and forth past him, hurrying from one incomprehensible task to another. "I did most of this while you were eating, you see, but there are still a few things left, a few unknotted ends." The little man's explanation enlightened Simon not one whit, but things had been happening fast enough to satisfy even his impatient nature. He nodded and dangled his feet some more. "Well, I suppose that's all I can do tonight," Morgenes said at last. "You had better wander back and go to bed. Come here early in the morning, perhaps, right after you do your chores." "Chores?" gasped Simon. "Chores? Tomorrow?" "Certainly," snapped the doctor. "You don't think anything out of the ordinary is going to happen, do you? Do you suppose that the king is going to announce, 'Oh, by the way, my brother escaped from the dungeon last night, so we'll all have a holiday and go look for him'? You don't think that, do you?" "No, and you would certainly not say, 'Rachel, I can't do my chores because Morgenes and I are plotting treason,' would you?" "Of course not." "Good. Then you will do your chores and come back as soon as you can, and then we will assess the situation. This is far more dangerous than you realize, Simon. But I am afraid you are now a part of things, for good or for ill. I had hoped to keep you out of all this." "Out of all what? Part of what, Doctor?" "Never mind, boy. Isn't your plate full enough already? I'll try to explain what I safely can tomorrow, but stoning night is not the best occasion to speak of things like—" Morgenes' words were chopped short by a loud pounding at the outer door. For a moment Simon and the doctor stood staring at one another. After a pause, the knocking was repeated. "Who's there?" Morgenes called, in a voice so calm Simon had to look again at the fear showing on the little man's face. "Inch," came the reply. Morgenes visibly relaxed. "Go away," he said. "I told you I didn't need you tonight." There was a brief silence. "Doctor," Simon whispered, "I think I saw Inch earlier." The dull voice came again. "I think I left something. Left it in your room, Doctor." "Come back and get it another time," Morgenes called, and this time the irritation was genuine. I'm far too busy to be disturbed right now. Simon tried again. I think I saw him when I was carrying Joss. Open this door immediately, in the king's name. Simon felt cold despair grip his stomach. This new voice did not belong to Inch. By the lesser crocodile, Morgane swore in soft wonderment. The cow-eyed dullard has sold us out. I didn't think he had the sense. I will be disturbed no longer, he shouted then, jumping to the long table and straining to push it in front of the bolted inner door. I am an old man and need my rest. Simon leaped to help, his terror mixed with an inexplicable rush of exhilaration. A third voice called from the hallway, a cruel, hoarse voice. Your rest will be a long one indeed, old man. Simon stumbled and nearly fell as his knees buckled beneath him. Pyrates was here. A hideous crunching noise began to echo through the inner hallway as Simon and the doctor finally slid the heavy table into place. Axes, said Morganes, and sprang along the table in search of something. Doctor! Simon hissed, bouncing up and down in fright. The sound of splintering wood reverberated outside. What can we do? He whirled to find himself confronted with a scene of madness. Morganes was up on his knees on the tabletop, crouching beside an object that Simon recognized after an instant as a birdcage. The doctor had his face pressed close against the slender bars. He was cooing and muttering to the creatures within, even as Simon heard the outer door crash down. What are you doing? Simon gasped. Morganes hopped down, carrying the cage, and trotted across the room to the window. At Simon's yelp, he turned to look calmly at the terrified youth, then smiled sadly and shook his head. Of course, boy, he said, I must make provision for you too, just as I promised your father. How little time we had. He set the cage down and scuttled back to the table, where he groped about in the clutter even as the chamber door began to rock with the impact of heavy blows. Harsh voices could be heard and the clatter of men in armor. Morganes found what he sought, a wooden box, and upended it, dumping some shining golden thing into his palm. He began to move back to the window, then stopped and retrieved also a sheaf of thin parchments from the chaos of the tabletop. Take this, will you please? He said, handing the bundle to Simon as he hurried back to the window. It's my life of Prestigion, and I begrudge Pyrates the pleasure of criticism. Stupefied, Simon took the papers and tucked them into his waistband beneath his shirt. The doctor reached into the cage and removed one of its small inhabitants, cupping it in his hand. It was a tiny silver-gray sparrow. As Simon watched in numb astonishment, the doctor calmly tied the shiny bauble, a ring, to the sparrow's leg with a bit of twine. A tiny scrap of parchment was bound already to its other leg. Be strong with this heavy burden, he said quietly, speaking, it seemed, to the little bird. The blade of an axe crashed through the table. Morganes bent over and picked a long stick up off the floor and broke the high window, then lifted the sparrow to the sill and let it go. The bird hopped along the frame for a moment, then took wing and disappeared into the evening sky. One by one, the doctor released 5 more sparrows that way, until the cage stood empty. A large piece had been bitten from the table's center. Simon could see the angry faces and the flare of torchlight on metal beyond. The doctor beckoned. The tunnel, boy, and quickly. Behind them, another chunk of wood tore loose and clattered to the floor. As they sped across the room, the doctor handed Simon something small and round. Rub this and you will have light, Simon, he said. It is better than a torch. He swept the hanging aside and pulled the door open. Go on, hurry. Look for the Tanja stairs, then climb. As Simon entered the corridor mouth, The great door sagged on its hinges and collapsed. The table toppled. Morgenes turned. "But, Doctor," Simon shouted, "come with me. We can escape." The doctor looked at him and smiled, shaking his head. The table before the doorway was pushed aside with a smash of glass, and a group of armed men in green and yellow began to push past the wreckage. In the midst of the Erkenguard, crouching like a toad in a garden of swords and axes, was Breugar, the Lord Constable. In the littered hallway stood the bulky form of Inch. Behind him, Priority's cloak flashed scarlet. "Stop!" a voice thundered through the room. Simon was still able to marvel, in the midst of all his fear and confusion, that such a sound could come from Morgenes' frail body. The doctor stood now before the Erkenguard, fingers splayed in a strange gesture. The air began to bend and shimmer between the doctor and the startled soldiers. The very substance of nothingness seemed to grow solid as Morgenes' hands danced strange patterns. For a moment the torches outlined the scene before Simon's eyes as if it were frozen on an ancient tapestry. "Bless you, boy," Morgenes hissed. "Go now." Simon retreated another step down the corridor. Priorites pushed past the stunned guards, a blurry red shadow behind the wall of air. One of his hands stabbed forth. A seething, coruscating web of blue sparks marked where it touched the thickening air. Morgenes reeled, and his barrier began to melt like a sheet of ice. The doctor bent and swept up a pair of beakers from a rack on the floor. "Stop that youth!" Priorites shouted, and suddenly Simon could see his eyes above the scarlet cloak. Cold, black eyes, serpentine eyes that seemed to hold him, transfix him. The shimmering pane of air dissolved. "Take them!" spat Count Breugar, and the soldiers surged forward. Simon watched in sick fascination, wanting to run, but unable to. Nothing between him and the Erkenguard's swords but Morgenes. "Enki anu kai shigao!" The doctor's voice boomed and tolled like a bell made of stone. A wind shrieked through the chamber, flattening and extinguishing the torches. In the center of the maelstrom, Morgenes stood, a flask in each outstretched hand. In the brief instant of darkness, there was a crash, then a flare of incandescence as the glass beakers shattered into flame. In a heartbeat, fiery streams were running down the arms of Morgenes' cloak, and then his head was haloed in leaping, crackling tongues of fire. Simon was buffeted by terrible heat as the doctor turned to him once more. Simon was buffeted. Morgenes' face seemed already to shift and change behind the blazing mist that enveloped it. "Go, my Simon," he breathed, and he was voiced in flame. "It is too late for me. Go to Jazua." As Simon staggered backward in horror, the doctor's frail form leaped with burning radiance. Morgenes wheeled. Taking a few halting steps, he threw himself with outspread arms onto the screeching, quailing guardsmen who tore at each other in their desperation to escape back through the broken doorway. Hellish flames billowed upward, blackening the groaning roof beams. The very walls began to shudder. For a brief moment, Simon heard the harsh, choking voice of Priorites, intertwined with the sounds of Morgenes' final agonies. Then there was a great crack of light and an ear-thumping roar. A hot whip of air flung Simon down the passageway, blowing the door shut behind him with a noise like the hammer of judgment. Stunned, he heard the grinding, splintering shriek of the roof timbers collapsing. The door shuddered, wedged shut by many thousand weight of scorched oak and stone. For a long time he lay, racked with sobs, the tears of his eyes sucked away by the heat. At last he crawled to his feet. He found the warm stone wall with his hand and went stumbling down into darkness. And that is the end. And with that, I thank you for joining me. And I thank you for all your words of kindness and friendship. And it is a lot of help. So with that, I will say goodnight. And that I will be reading again tomorrow at 7, same Pacific Daylight Time, for those of you who can make it. And for those of you who are only able to make this particular time slot, I will be reading next week, I assume, at this time, barring anything strange and out of the ordinary. So, again, thank you very much. And thank you for joining me. And I'll see you then.